Okay, friends, strap yourself in because this story is one wild, scary ride. I'm Matt Emsh. Yeah, the Youngstown Dogman guy. There's a fine line between courage and just flat out incoherence when alcohol is involved. Jason managed to just hit the perfect ratio one night, and he decided to tell the following crazy story. Maybe he needed to get it off his chest, or maybe he just believes it needs to be told. It was the summer of 1992. Jason decided it was going to be the best one yet. He's been fishing and camping throughout his entire youth, but in his mind, that's all about to come to an end with two simple words: I do. Before the big day, Jason plans to make the most of his bachelor life and have an epic summer. He leaves his parents' house early that morning with all his camping gear and, of course, his pistol just in case. The park he's headed to is just a couple of hours away and is usually very quiet. He's heard a lot of wild stories about it and he's anxious to see it for himself. At first glance, Jason is not disappointed. Off in the distance, he can see a mix of open field and dense forest scattered around the rolling hills. To the left of the road is a dry riverbed, and Jason makes a mental note that it would make a great trail for him to follow. If it weren't for the occasional rock fence covered in moss, there was no way to tell if humans had ever even touched this area. Jason feels the familiar thrill of a new adventure as he climbs out of his truck and starts down the riverbed trail. After a couple of hours and a couple of rest breaks, he comes to a spot where the creek narrows with the 3-foot banks on either side. A cluster of trees sits to his left, and on his right is a beautiful open field of wildflowers. The wind Jason felt on his face and heard whistling through the trees all day, how quickly they disappeared and how fast they'd been replaced with something dark. It's a feeling of twisting that comes out of nowhere. He stops and he holds his breath, afraid to even exhale. Though he has no idea why it happened, he tries to stay positive and not give off any negativity. So he then sees it up ahead about 100 yards to his right. It's as if the negativity has taken a physical form. There's no movement or sound, yet Jason feels it demands his attention. Slowly, Jason reaches for his binoculars and immediately is hit with a blast of, "Don't do that." He stops dead for a single moment before continuing to lift them to his eyes. It was too late. A massive, black, hairy wolf thing. He tries to tell himself it's a bear. His breathing is getting quicker. Not quite a panic attack yet, but definitely some fear is setting in. It's a little after noon and the sun is high in the sky. The downward shadow it casts makes this thing's face darker. Its eyes were cloaked under a massive brow, but somehow Jason knows that it's glaring right at him. In contrast to the black face, he can see its white, glinting fangs. From that distance, they're still huge. There's no definition to its chest, but he can tell it's incredibly wide. No human is built like that. Jason feels sick. His knees start to buckle and his head begins to swim as he reaches for a nearby tree to try and steady himself. Poof, the creature vanishes. He feels his body start to relax just a little bit and he thinks, "Oh my God, thank God it's gone. What was that?" But a moment later, his body tightens once again as he sees it. This time now it's only about 70 yards away, staring with the dark, evil intent at Jason. Black, vacant eye sockets. He sees just a little bit of amber light in the middle of them. He could swear that it almost glows. Then he hears it too. He hears it speak to him in his head. If only you hadn't looked. It stretches up and over as if getting a better look at him, and then it vanishes again. It said that to him. He heard it in his head. If only you didn't look. Jason stumbles backwards and trips over a tree root, fighting the urge to turn and look again. He can't move. His mind is racing with a million thoughts. Would he become just another number of someone who went missing in the woods, never to be seen again? He doesn't want to become a stat, another check in the box that no one will ever remember him. Paralyzed with fear, he can't stand. Every thought that pops into his head is a horror worse than the last. Now Jason hears it, making noises as if it's taunting him, like it wants him to be afraid. Still hidden, he can hear it moving through the brush as it stomps and breaks branches. Again, it raises its head, only 40 yards away this time. The details are much clearer now, and it's even more grotesque than Jason ever imagined. Its face, glistening in the sun, also shimmers. Silvery strings from the corners of its mouth. Saliva is drooling out. I remember seeing a sight like that. It's one you won't forget. That mouth splits its face in its wide, slightly parted, sinister looking grin. Its head and its body are all one. If it has a neck, it's surrounded by pure muscle. Again, it vanishes, and this time it does so fast that it blurs out of sight. This sick game of peekaboo is more than Jason's mind can take. Part of him is resigned with the idea that he's not leaving this place alive, while another part of him says he needs to be ready to fight. I've been there before. Your life flashes before your eyes. You have something so close to you, so alien, you don't know what to do. It's indescribable. As these options are swirling around in his head, the emotions that go along with them combine to create a head spinning, stomach churning mess. Jason slowly begins to stand back up, afraid to look around or even turn his head. The noises were getting louder. Now was the time to be ready. It pops its head up again, and now only 20 feet away. It was towering over the brush, standing well over 8 feet tall. As it started to move out of the brush and headed towards the clearing across from him, Jason began to cry. This is it. This is how it's going to end. But his survival instinct finally kicked in and snapped him out of his self-pity just as the thing disappears once again into the thick green underbrush. Then it steps out of the brush. leaning forward at the waist, its arms hanging at its side. Its hands are past its knees. They're tipped with black, sharp claws. And Jason can't stop staring at its huge chest. It's breathing so loud and quickening with each breath, like it's pumping itself up for something. Then it goes silent. Jason's blood turns to ice. He's frozen. The thing, as if in slow motion, bends at its knees, leans forward, throws its arms back, and it looks ready to pounce any second. Its muscles are flexing. Jason stumbles backward in a feeble attempt to get out of the way when, boom, something explodes to his left. It's basically raining debris all over the creek bed. Jason feels a gust of wind as this reddish brown blur roars past him, colliding right into the creature's chest. For a brief second, Jason sees night in front of him, but empty space. He's hit by a scream coming from the other side of the brush. A scream so loud and primal, it pulsates through his entire body. His eyeballs are vibrating. The scream is followed by a deep thump that shook the very ground with the force he had never known. He rolls over and wills his body to move, but it doesn't respond. He can only lie there feeling and hearing with sounds like a war zone all around him. When he does finally move, to his complete horror, he finds himself not going the opposite way. He's actually drawn to the noise, to the chaos, like a moth to the flame. Jason shuffles to the edge of the creek and gently peeks over the edge. 30 feet away in a clearing, two heathens, monsters, hulks, are locked in battle, biting, clawing, clubbing, and tearing at each other. It's primal, raw, and vicious. Jason clamps his hands over his ears to block out the enraged roars that each bite elicits. And that's when it clicks for Jason. The realization that he was just saved by a SASUATCH. He's watched all the shows and seen every YouTube video. Jason steps back into reality, if you can call it that, just in time to see the Dogman get back up on its feet. The creature leaps on the SASUATCH from behind, biting down on his upper thigh. The scream of pain is even louder than the others, and once again, Jason just collapses on the ground, covering his head in a fetal position. The young SASUATCH is now in trouble. Big trouble. Trying to shield itself from the endless series of blows coming from the creature, he's losing. Jason knows he has to do something. If the creature wins this Dogman thing, Jason will be right back in its crosshairs and it will be coming for him next. Then he remembers he has a gun. There's no way to kill it. But maybe he can distract it long enough to give the young SASUATCH a fighting chance. Jason crawls over to his gear and pulls out the pistol. He takes a deep breath and takes aim. The flurry of movement in front of him, it makes it impossible to get a clean shot. Most of the Dogman's body is just moving way too fast. But he holds his breath, and he starts to squeeze the trigger when he suddenly hears a massive scream, one way louder than the others, and he hears it from far. Turning his gun in the direction to whatever this new catastrophe is, Jason beholds an even larger beast crashing through the tree line, speeding directly toward the fight in progress. The dogman forgets his current target and prepares for the incoming offensive, but it's way too late. The alpha Sasquatch has already landed, smashing the creature on its back so hard that its head snaps back and bounces off the ground. The creature's body goes limp immediately and falls face first into the ground. The two Sasquatch stand over the dogman's motionless body, just watching, waiting. And at last, with a solid kick to the side to satisfy them that this monster will never move again, the victorious Sasquatch raises its head and bellows out a mighty roar before dragging his foe's lifeless body off into the darkness. Jason stands up and catches the attention of the younger beast, who is still a good 9 feet tall. It stares at him and cautiously advances in his direction. When Jason realizes that he has the pistol in his hand, he gently lowers it. The Sasquatch continues to advance towards him, but just then Jason's vision starts to dim and shrink into a tunnel, and the earth begins to spin. And the last thing that Jason remembers is his confusion as how the earth could be coming up to meet his face so fast. When he wakes up, his head is pounding, and his stomach feels like he just woke up from one crazy bender. Jason puts his head between his knees and inhales the cool night air. And then he looks around. He's sitting on the ground, leaning up against his truck with his pistol right next to him. Was that all a nightmare? Did he even leave his parking spot? Or did he nod off instead and his mind just created this epic monster smackdown movie in his head as he slept? Jason began to replay the events as he remembered and concluded it must have been a dream. There was no way that it was real. At this point, he doesn't want to go camping anymore. He just wants to go home. As he stands up, Jason sees a huge handprint perfectly imprinted on the dust on the hood of his truck, exactly placed where somebody would stick their hand trying to steady themselves. Jason freezes as the bombshell of truth of what actually just happened to him. He never moved so fast in his life. He jumped in his truck, took off, tires screeching, smoking him as he roars down the trail. For years, Jason never told anyone about this story, and for years, that thing has stalked his dreams. And on bad night, the dogman catches him. That story's just crazy, right? What do you guys think? Is the dogman all bark and no brawn, and the Sasquatch is really the big man on campus? You know my answer on that one. Be careful out there, friends. You never know what is lurking in those woods. Please do me a favor. Subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell. I'd love to have you as part of the population of Planet 412. Take care, everybody. Until next time.